Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming today. The last they told me we were going to have 6 people here, so this is very exciting. My name's Lisa Wheeler. I'm the Director of Curatorial Services here at the booth, and I wanted to start out, as we normally do, by talking about what's on view. Currently on view in the photography Picturing America gallery is Danny Lyon, the bike riders, and the Weston Focus women. In the temporary gallery is Concept to Canvas, 6 contemporary artists. In Borderlands is the 22nd annual Kids Cowboy Up. In the special exhibition gallery is Western American Art South of the Sweet Tea Line 7, which is one of the exhibits we're going to take a look at today. And if you haven't been, the large Rawson presidential paintings left the booth, and we have a new acquisitions gallery in that space right now. And if you haven't seen it, be sure and take time to go up there and explore the second floor. And then the main upcoming event is the member opening for the Sweet Tea 7, and that'll be on January the 10th. We decided to hold off on that until after the holidays. And having said that, I want to thank our sponsors of that exhibit, Don and Neva Roundtree. We appreciate their support. And now we'll get on with the show. Do you have the slide, Lindsay? There we go. A long time ago, our first curator, James Burns, and of course, director Seth Hopkins, decided that the booth had been open about 2 years, so why not jump into it and try to find other collections in the Southeast that had Western art. And so this is a picture of the first catalog and the exhibit dates that started back in 2005. At that time, they reached out to 10 institutions, and you can see the institutions here, including the High in Atlanta, the Macon Museum of Arts and Sciences, the Lamar Dodd Art Center, Brenau University, and on and on. And then, oh, is this for me? And they only reached out to 5 collectors, or maybe they'd only found 5 Western art collectors at that time here in the South. But it was Mr. and Ms. Jack Morris, and you remember maybe that he is the founder, or was the founder, of the Scottsdale Art Auction, and he was, for all you beach lovers, he was also the co-owner of the Morris Whiteside Gallery on Hilton Head Island. So you may have experienced his gallery at some time. Fred Bentley there was a popular attorney in Marietta who also had a small collection of Western art. The Birds, they're still active with the booth. It's Dr. Dan Bird and his wife Betty. And they had a very interesting collection. Anne Eldridge participated in that exhibit, and as you may know, she went on to become a major supporter financially and in terms of donations of artwork to the booth. And then Lynn and Dick Berkowitz, they lived kind of in an area right outside of Savannah. It's a beautiful neighborhood, kind of in the swampy marsh area. And he was on the board of directors of the the Georgia Museum of Art in Athens. And they had an incredible collection that we got to go and visit. For Sweet Tea 2, it was taken over by the next curator. James had left us, and the next curator was Jeff Donaldson, and he was in charge of Sweet Tea 2. And he worked with 8 institutions that you can see there. We brought on the Hunter Museum, which is in Chattanooga for that one. And then the one that I still don't know the backstory on it, but last time I checked the map, Maine was not in the southeast. And for some reason, we borrowed from the Colby College Museum of Art in Winterville, Maine. Notable works that came out of this, you probably recognize the work there of Tony Abeta. Well, that was in the collection of the Raymond James Financial Group or Financial Collection. So this is the first time we're introduced to the work of Tony Abeta here. And then this is the piece that came out of Maine, a really beautiful E.I. Couse Native American work. For Sweet Tea 3, Jeff is, this is his second go-round with one, so Sweet Tea 3, and this time he works with 13 institutions. Notice the Raymond James are helping us again on that one. This is the first time we've worked with the Tennessee State Museum. It was definitely not the last. Oh, and Lumiere Gallery, they loaned to this exhibition. First time we worked with Coca-Cola, first time we worked with Chick-fil-A there too. And so this is where we learned about Chanteau Begay, and we have a wonderful piece of his up in the Modern Gallery. But again, this one came from the Raymond James Financial Collection. This is photographed by Imogene Cunningham called Magnolia Blossom, California. And this is what we borrowed from the Lumiere Gallery. So this established our relationship with Bob Yellowlees, the owner of that gallery. He's been here several times to speak at various things. And it was the beginning, if you think about it, it was the beginning of the Booth photography collection. This is where it kind of all, that seed got planted about at this point. And then this is the first time we had such a famous work of art. Deborah K. Butterfield, known as an American artist, widely known and appreciated all across America. Somebody I studied a lot in art school and all that. And lo and behold, we went over to the Karen and Joel Piasik's house in Birmingham, and there it was. And we got to bring it over here and show it in that particular sweet tea. For Sweet Tea 4, Jeff is still in charge. He took it on to do 3 of these, let me tell you. This is my 3rd one, so I know. But anyway, he uses 13 institutions. Notice that very popular name there at the top, the Jack Warner Foundation. This is the first time we've reached out to them to borrow something. Most of the others, well, that was the first time we borrowed from Cheekwood up in Nashville. First time we borrowed from the Museum of Contemporary Art. First time we borrowed from the Jules Collins Smith. That's the art museum at Auburn University. And so this is when we were introduced to the work of ZZ Way. And this became out of the beverage, make sure I get my name right, Wayne and Kitty Beverage. They're some of our members that live in Augusta, Georgia, and they introduced us to ZZ Way. And then, as you know, a few years later, we had a major exhibition of his work and now own a stunning piece of his that's up again in the Modern West Gallery. Preston Singletary, he's on my wish list for the Booth Museum. Very, very popular glass artist. A lot of times his work will actually have lights in it, and so they glow. They're lit up from behind and they glow. And over at the Piasik's house, they have one of 4 Native American baskets that are, they're glass. And I've never had the nerve to ask them if we could unconnect all that from the wall and bring it over here. So, but I love to go visit that when I can. And then this was the first, as far as I know, the first and only time we've ever had an original Georgia O'Keeffe painting in this building. And sure, we've had some, prints and copies and this and that, but this was the only time a real one visited the booth. And it was from the Auburn, the Art Museum at Auburn. And then Western American art south of the Sweet Tea, line 5. Well, this is when it all went south right here, literally. And you'll see why. It was my turn to take one on. And I have the most incredible staff in the world between Nikki Morris, Liz Gentry, Chris Tuna, Mark Medley, Christy Grieve, and Marion Hudson. And none of these exhibits would ever happen without them. Diane Holmesley was the development director at the time, and here we went on our great adventure. The Westervelt collection. So the Jack Warner Westervelt collection. It was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. A long time ago, we took a booth member trip over there to visit his art collection. He was the president of Gulf States Paper for 50 years, and he amassed what was known as the premier collection of American art, and that included antiquities and furniture and on and on and on, in the entire United States. Well, something went wrong, and I'm not an attorney, and I don't know how any of that stuff works, but the company decided, he had stepped down from the board, he'd appointed his son. The company decided that art collection belonged to the paper company and not to Mr. Warner individually. And so they took it away from him and began to sell it off. And so the reason I put that slide in here is to say this was right in the middle of the fight. This was right when all that was happening. And then that year we also borrowed something from the High Museum. And if you'll look, we had 24 couples, including couples and individual lenders that agreed to lend us Sweet Tea 5. These are the amazing paintings that were on loan to us from the Westervelt collection of Valentine Bromley, a George Catlin, an E.I. Cowse, a Charles Dease, a Frank Tenney Johnson, Charles Bird King, William T. Ranney, Charlie Russell, John McStanley. I mean, we're talking top tier, and they were all here at the Booth Museum. So I want to just show you, these are all the collections from Georgia that participated that year. And if you'll notice the 4 that are underlined, what's happening there is Diane and I were sent to Florida. And when I say sent to Florida, we were sent to Boca Raton, the bottom, near the bottom. And we were charged with driving back and visiting every single collector that we knew in Florida, and then on up into Georgia, and see what they had in their collections that we might ask to borrow. So these were the Georgia people on that trip. The Berkowitzes and the Borlands lived outside of Savannah. The Jeters, they lived somewhere in the middle of the state. I don't remember what town. And the Beverages, like I mentioned, they were over in Augusta. So we flew into Fort Lauderdale. And we then rented our car and drove over to the Aubins in Boca Raton. We started winding our way back up. I don't remember which city Craig was in. Now he's out in Springs, Colorado. And Mr. and Mrs. Teets, they lived in Vero Beach. And when I say they lived in Vero Beach, they lived on the beach. Their house was right there, gorgeous, view. Pete Medler, he was kind of somewhere in the middle. The Yablonskys were up in Gainesville. And I can't remember where Miss Harlan lived. But, again, you're driving, you'd go a day, you'd visit a couple of people, you'd go drive some more, you'd visit a few more people. And then that trip on into Georgia, well, we were on the road from Monday to Friday. We got back to Cartersville on a late on a Friday afternoon after that one. Well, Seth didn't feel like we'd found enough, and so he sent us to Tennessee. So then this was our Tennessee trip. Well, anytime we go to Tennessee, the next thing we do is drive back through Alabama and catch up to our Alabama friends. So we went and visited Karen and Joel and the Farins there, and then he still didn't think we had enough. So then we went to North Carolina. So that was our 5-state tour. Well, this was in the Warner collection, probably my favorite piece in the Warner collection, the Kaus, the flute player with his sons. And the great story with that is there's another little Kaus there, and that little Kaus was about this big, and this couple in Marietta named the Kohuteks, K-O-H-U-T-E-K, she called me, her name's Katie, and she called me one day and she said, I've got this little painting and my dad got it from the Kaus Sharp, was now the Kaus Sharp historic site in Taos, and we think it's real, we're not sure, we think it's real, and but there's no signature on it. And I said, well, I'll take a look at it. And in the meantime, when I went to visit her, she'd had it unframed. She'd had it checked out by an art gallery or something. They'd unframed it. Well, guess what? It was signed. And she did have a real Kaus. And I love pairing those two, that great big one and that little bitty one together in the exhibit. And then another one from Jack Warner there, The Pioneers. His Charlie Russell, and then that Buck Dunton, that one belonged to Craig McNabb. And then this was also the first year that we got to include folk art. So I borrowed a cow chair from Cowboy James and included it in that exhibit. But the problem with this exhibit was that I picked up so much art that we had to use every single interior wall that we could build in that building, in that room. We had to take down all those Geronimos up there on the outside of that room, use all that space, and still barely squished it all in there. So my point is, my eyes were bigger than my stomach or whatever, and I overshot it pretty bad. And because that was not enough adventure, for a couple of years between then, I guess 2018 and 20, right before COVID hit, we had about 2 years in there where we were traveling to Texas. The idea was we were going to start an affinity group of members in Texas, and we were going to pilfer through their art collections and see what we could bring to Georgia. And so we identified 20 collectors. And over the years, we would go and visit with these people and look at their collections, and we would hold special events for them in Texas about Western art. And one of the people that we came to meet was a gentleman named David Dyke, and he owned a gallery. And at that time, it was pretty much in downtown Dallas area. So I just wanted to share the logistics of how this kind of thing works. Me and Chris Tuna, our exhibits manager, and Christy Grieve, our curatorial assistant, hopped on a plane and went to Fort Worth on a Monday. And we rented a van. And before we got there, Chris was aware of all the art that we were going to be picking up for this Sweet Tea show. And so he had ordered art supplies very similar to these. There was probably about 6 or 7 of those bin boxes. There were probably 2 of those giant rolls there, all manner of tape and gloves and, stuff. And you have to have your phone to take pictures and just on and on and on. And David was our friend, and he was in between gallery shows. And so he said, sure, you can use my building as your place to pack, right? Well, little did he know. I mean, he was stunned when you opened the door, you couldn't even get in there for all of our stuff that was piled into his gallery. But anyway, Chris had worked out this map so we wouldn't waste a minute. And if this collector was here, the next one was going to be right there and right there and right there to make the most use of our time. And so we would go to, 3 or 4 collectors' homes a day, and we would do what we call a soft pack of their art, which is just get enough stuff around it to protect it, haul it back over to David Dyke's gallery, and then Christy and Chris, who have way better knees than I do, would get down on the floor, and they'd make boxes out of big sheets of cardboard, and we'd put all that stuff in there and then put them in bin boxes and get them ready for the shipper. And we did this 5 days straight, for 5 days. And then we flew back on Friday, and the fine art shipper went over to David Dyke's on Monday and picked up the artwork, and we got it here on Tuesday, which was pretty amazing. But that's how a fine art shipper works. It's the guys go back. They don't sleep. It's a dual driver van, truck, and they drive straight through. There's no stops. There's no staying at a hotel, any of that kind of stuff. Okay, so to Texas. Oh, look, it's back. My painting is back. My favorite painting. So remember, the Warner collection's been sold off, most of it, and we're in Texas, and we walk into Brian King's event home. It's like Ray Thacker's house on steroids. It's kind of the way that goes. And sure enough, there on Brian's wall, my painting. And I knew that, it was safe and that it had found a good home. A few notable works in that one were Jose Arpa, by Jose Arpa, the Pick Cotton painting. Jose Arpa was born around the mid-1800s and was a very, very famous Texas painter. And we found this Mark Maggiore, The Journey West, and again, a family's home out there. And then I always mess up the pronunciation, but it's something like Jung, and the painting So. And I just love that cow, and that's so funny to me. And then we're to the exhibit at hand here. Been working on this one for quite a while. And if you look, there's something that's really changed in terms of institutions. We didn't use an institution this year. We think we've plucked everything from their collections that we can. And so this one is all about people. If you go back through those years, all these people that participated in Sweet Tea, a whole bunch of them ended up giving some, if not all, of their Western art collections to the Booth Museum. And so those are all the people. So this exhibit's kind of half and half. It's about half of what's been donated, and then half that are, that lenders are letting us borrow. So you see the Aubin's name pops up there again. Levon Thomas had loaned to us many times. So have the Clappers, the Bowers, or Mary Carol and Henry, and Joyce Stevens, and some other surprises along the way. Sally Quirin, the last one on the list. I think you'll be tickled when you go up there. She was interviewed on, oh gosh, what's the one where you take your Antiques Roadshow? Yeah, Antiques Roadshow. She had found a beautiful bandolier bag in a thrift store in Athens like 20 or 30 years ago. And she wanted to give it a good home, and so it's now been donated to the booth, and it's up there in the exhibit for y'all to take a look at. And then the private collections that are participating this year, of course, there are three that don't want you to know who they are there. And then the Wileys, the Farrens, the Hayes, the Talent Osborne collection, the Piasics, Cowboy James Edwards, the Eatons, the Sermons, the Strachis, the Hoggins, the Roundtrees, Millers, Brogdons, Faulkners, Altmans, and artist David Wright are participating this year. And me and those little paintings, those little bitty paintings. And so this lady called and she says, I've got this painting by Albert Looking Elk. And I said, okay. And she said, I think you want to use it in your sweet tea show. And I said, well, I'd love to look at it and learn more about Albert. Well, it turns out that Albert Looking Elk was born at the Taos Pueblo, and he modeled for E.I. Kaus and for Oscar Burninghouse. Oscar Burninghouse, kind of as a way to pay him, gave him paints and brushes and little canvas boards and art lessons. And so Albert Looking Elk, he grew up to become one of what is known as the three Taos painters. The other two were Albert Lujan and Juan Mirabal, and he would sell his work to tourists. And so up there in that gallery is this teeny tiny little Albert Looking Elk for y'all to enjoy. And then I found this landscape in one of the private collections. Artist I hadn't heard of before named Stephen Datz. And again, I'd love to acquire one of his works of art for our collection here at the booth. And then Scott Burdick. This was one of a series of three. And this one's called Of Our, and it belongs to the Farrens. And the good news about this is on the 10th, January 10th, Scott has agreed to come and be one of the panelists for that evening. So I'm looking forward to that. And, you can give me a Joni Falk any day of the week. I just think her work is gorgeous. And this one, when you see it, it's just got the most peaceful, nice, calm feel to it. So be sure and don't miss that one. And then T. Allen Lawson, another premier, not thought of as just Western, but major, famous American artist. And I love his play on words here. He is called Family Portrait, 4 Generations. And you might not can tell, but one of those cows is about to give birth here any second. And then I thought this was a beautiful piece by Sonia Turpinning. We get so many Native American women with their children, but this is a dad. It's called Fatherhood, and there's a father holding his child, and I just think it's so sweet. And she also agreed to come and be a speaker on January the 10th. And then I also wanted the collector view, so Susie and Doug Haugen are going to represent the collectors on that particular panel. So, anybody got questions for me? Yes.
How far in advance do you do this? This must be years or?
We try, with the exception of COVID year, we're supposed to do one of these every 3 years. And so as soon as this one goes up, it's time to start thinking about the next one. Any other questions? Yes.
How much does the insurance for all of this?
I'm real lucky. They don't let me do anything with numbers around here. Uh, but our CEO, Kathy Lee Eckert, she handles all that, and we have to, as part of Nikki's job is we have to estimate what these how much one show has in terms of the dollar amount of the artwork, and we give that information to Kathy Lee, and then every year when she renews insurance, she's got all those temporary exhibits in there and uses that as a figure for the insurance company to bid. Yeah. Yes?
So this is a geographic question. So as I understand it, the sweet tea is about Mason-Dixon line south.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the Mason-Dixon line predates Western anything. So how strictly is that geography followed?
Not super strict. The way that came about, by the way, was our first curator, James Burns, when he and Seth were working on the idea for this series, he gave it that name, just kind of tongue-in-cheek, gave it that name, and it's stuck ever since. And even on the, even on the catalogs, there's a little swoosh every time, and he coined that as the sweet tea swoosh. And we've kept that all these years, on these catalogs. And, and I feel like we cheated a good bit when we went to Texas, but, so we take our liberties with the whole thing. Obviously, like getting that painting out of Maine for this show is just strange. Anybody else? Yes.
With the 3D, there's the painting, and I don't remember, but it has the car that's like a 3D car
Yes.
attached to it. With sculptures like that, or partial mixed media pieces, or the ones that are in the case, they're the little like homes,
Yes.
How are those displayed in the homes of the collectors?
The one that you're talking about, Gate and Casito, the Tim Pritheroe, those were donated. The lady literally brought them in, and I met her at the Circle desk, so I don't know in her case. As far as the Michael Godey, which is the one with the car, and that anyway, that one was literally hanging on the wall in their home. So, yep. Anybody else? Yes.
In regard to Texas, Seth has said that Dallas, or Fort Worth, where the West begins, Dallas, where the South fizzles out.
That's true. That is true. Okay. Well, I appreciate all y'all coming today. If you have time, be sure and go up there and enjoy the exhibit. All right. Thank you.